Ambassador Karen Price stood near the large window of the diplomatic ship called Horizon's Gate and looked at the strange, purple sky of Velcros Prime. 3 alien suns shined down on the planet below and made everything look beautiful but also very different from Earth. She had worked for 15 years to reach this moment. Humanity was finally going to join the Galactic Concordance. This was a group of 47 alien species that had kept peace across this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. Karen's team was small, but important. She had 6 other diplomats with her who knew different languages and cultures. Commander Jake Morrison led 3 security officers who were supposed to keep everyone safe. There were also some scientists on the ship who wanted to study this historic moment and learn about alien technology. Earth had been preparing for this day since the Concordance made first contact 8 years ago. Their big ship had appeared near Jupiter with a message that said they wanted to meet humanity, but they needed to be careful about it. The aliens from Velcros were called Velcrosians, and they looked like giant insects, but they walked on 2 legs and had 4 arms. Their ambassador was named Threktal, and he was very tall, maybe 3 meters high. When he first greeted Karen and her team, the translation machine said he was being warm and friendly. The formal ceremony where Earth would sign the agreement to join the Concordance was supposed to happen in 3 days. Representatives from every species in the Concordance would be there to watch. Everything seemed perfect on the first day. The Velcrosians showed them around some parts of their capital city. The buildings were made of materials that seemed to grow like plants but were as strong as metal. There were aliens everywhere from dozens of different species. Some looked like birds, others like fish that somehow walked on land, and some were just clouds of gas inside special suits. Karen felt excited because this meant humanity would soon be part of this amazing community. On the second day, things started to feel wrong. Karen noticed there were more guards around than before. These were Concordance soldiers from different species, and they all carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. Commander Morrison told her that his security team was being stopped from going to certain areas. The day before, they could walk almost anywhere, but now doors were locked and guards said those places were restricted. Jake Morrison looked worried when he told Karen this news. He said something felt off about the whole situation. But Karen believed it was probably just some kind of cultural misunderstanding. Maybe the Concordance had rules about security before big ceremonies that she didn't know about yet. The third day started with a surprise. Instead of being taken to the Grand Assembly where the ceremony was supposed to happen, Karen and her team were told to go to a different room. The message said it was an auxiliary chamber, and they needed to go there for some final preparations. Karen brought all 9 people from her delegation. She didn't want to leave anyone behind. The security officers came too, even though they weren't originally part of the ceremony plan. When they entered the chamber, Karen immediately felt something was very wrong. The room was much smaller than she expected, and it was darker. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to absorb light. Around the edges of the room stood dozens of Concordance soldiers from multiple species. They all had their weapons ready. In the center of the room stood Threktal, but he didn't look friendly anymore. His posture was stiff and aggressive. The translation device on Karen's uniform picked up Threktal's words and turned them into English. But this time his tone was completely different. There was no warmth at all. He said that humanity had been judged and found unworthy. The Concordance had looked at Earth's history and seen nothing but war and violence. They had studied humanity's military capabilities and been alarmed at how fast humans developed new weapons. They had tested human psychology and decided that humans were too aggressive and too unpredictable. The invitation to join the Concordance had not been real. It had been a test to see how humanity would behave. And according to Threktal, humanity had failed this test completely. Karen felt her heart start beating very fast. She stepped forward and tried to speak calmly. She said that Earth had come in peace and wanted only friendship. She explained that yes, humanity had fought wars in the past, but they had learned from their mistakes. She said that humans had ended most conflicts on their own planet and united under one government specifically so they could join the galactic community as a peaceful species. She asked Threktal to reconsider and give humanity another chance to prove themselves. Threktal made a gesture with one of his 4 arms. It was quick and sharp like a knife cutting through air. That single gesture was a command. The room exploded with light and heat. Plasma weapons fired from every direction. The Concordant soldiers had been waiting for this moment. Commander Jake Morrison reacted faster than anyone else. He threw himself in front of Karen and pushed her toward the floor. His body armor took the first hits from the plasma bolts, but the weapons were incredibly powerful. The armor held for maybe 3 seconds before it started to melt through. In those 3 seconds, while Jake's body was being torn apart by alien weapons, Karen managed to do one thing. She pressed the emergency beacon hidden inside her diplomatic badge. It was a small device that Earth had given to all ambassadors in case something went terribly wrong. The beacon used quantum communication technology that Earth had developed in secret. It could send messages across vast distances almost instantly using particles that were entangled with receivers back home. The beacon transmitted everything. It sent video from the tiny camera in Karen's badge. It sent audio from the microphone. It sent her biometric data showing her heart rate spiking and then stopping. It sent all of this information in a compressed burst that lasted less than 1 second. Then the plasma fire reached Karen too, and she died along with Jake Morrison and every other human in that chamber. The massacre took 53 seconds from start to finish. All 9 members of the diplomatic delegation were killed. Their bodies were burned so badly that they couldn't be recognized anymore. Threktal looked at the remains without any emotion showing in his alien features. He gave orders for the bodies to be disposed of and the room to be cleaned. 12 minutes later, the Horizon's Gate was still in orbit around Velcros Prime. The crew had no idea what had just happened on the planet below. They were waiting for Ambassador Price to contact them and tell them about the final preparations. Instead, 6 Concordance warships appeared around them. The captain of Horizon's Gate barely had time to send out a distress signal before the alien ships opened fire. 73 humans died when their ship exploded. The pieces of Horizon's Gate burned up in the atmosphere of Velcros Prime like shooting stars. But Karen's message had already been sent. The quantum beacon had transmitted its data to a relay station at the edge of the Velcro system. That relay sent it to another relay and then another. The message jumped across space using automated systems that the Concordance didn't even know existed. It took 4 days for the message to reach Earth, traveling through a network of communication satellites that humanity had secretly placed along the route between Earth and Velcros. The message arrived at Earth Defense Command first. A junior officer received it and immediately called his superior. Within an hour, it had reached the highest levels of human government. President Linda Hayes watched the 60 seconds of video in her office, along with the heads of the military and intelligence services. The room was completely silent as they watched Ambassador Karen Price die. When the video ended, nobody spoke for almost a minute. Then President Hayes stood up from her chair and looked at General Marcus Webb, who commanded all of Earth's military forces. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes were filled with cold fury. She spoke just 3 words, but everyone in the room knew what they meant. Those 3 words would change everything. She said, "Mobilize the fleet." General Marcus Webb stood in the command center buried deep under the surface of the moon, at a place called Earth Base Armstrong. The base was 3 kilometers underground where no enemy could see it or easily attack it. Around him were dozens of screens showing holographic displays of ships and weapons and soldiers, all moving into position. Earth's military was waking up after years of pretending to be small and harmless. The Concordance thought they knew everything about human military capabilities. They had been watching Earth for 8 years since first contact. They counted 12 exploration vessels and some defense platforms orbiting Earth and Mars. They thought humanity was weak and primitive. They were completely wrong about that. While Ambassador Karen Price and other diplomats talked about peace and friendship with the aliens, Earth's military had been busy building a secret war machine. Hidden in the darkness of the Kuiper Belt far beyond Neptune, humanity had constructed massive shipyards. Automated factories worked day and night using resources mined from asteroids and frozen comets. These facilities built warships that the Concordance never suspected existed. There were 67 Hunter-class destroyers equipped with railguns that could shoot metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The railgun rounds could punch through the armor of any known Concordance capital ship. There were hundreds of Reaper drones, which were small fighter craft, controlled by artificial intelligence. These drones could think and react faster than any living pilot from any species. The most secret project was called Nightfall. This was commanded by Admiral Gregory Stone, who controlled his forces from a massive carrier ship named EDF Retribution. Nightfall consisted of stealth ships that could become almost invisible to enemy sensors. These ships carried weapons that made old nuclear bombs look like toys. The weapons used antimatter, which released more energy than anything except maybe a star. Even a small antimatter explosion could destroy an entire city or vaporize a capital ship instantly. President Linda Hayes appeared on the main screen in the command center. She was calling from her office in Geneva, where the United Earth government was headquartered. Her face looked tired but determined. She asked Marcus how long it would take for the fleet to reach Velcros Prime, where the aliens had murdered the human delegation. Marcus pulled up a star chart showing the route. He said 6 days at maximum speed, but then he told the president something she wasn't expecting. He said they shouldn't start with Velcros Prime. The president asked him to explain his thinking. Marcus zoomed in on a different star system called Draxos. He explained that Velcros was the diplomatic and cultural center of the Concordance, but it wasn't their military heart. Intelligence reports suggested that Concordance Military Command operated from a huge station in the Draxos system. This station coordinated fleet movements and strategic planning for dozens of sectors. If humanity wanted to send a real message, they needed to cut off the head of the snake. Going after Velcros first would be satisfying emotionally, but it wouldn't cripple the enemy's ability to fight back. Secretary of Defense Paul Morris joined the conversation. He pointed out that the Concordance had hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. Earth only had less than 200 combat-ready vessels, and most of them had never been tested in real warfare. The simulations and training exercises were good, but nobody really knew how the ships would perform in actual battle against alien technology. Marcus understood these concerns, but he had a different perspective. He said the Concordance believed humans were primitives who barely knew how to leave their own solar system. Every war game and simulation that Earth's military had run showed the same result. Surprise and overwhelming aggression were humanity's only real advantages. The moment the Concordance realized how dangerous humans actually were, they would adapt their defenses. So Earth needed to hit hard and hit fast and make the aliens pay an unbearable price for every human life they had taken. President Hayes was quiet for a long moment while she thought about this. Then she asked Marcus the most important question. She needed to know if humanity could actually win this war. Could they defeat an enemy that controlled hundreds of star systems and had been spacefaring for thousands of years? Marcus gave her an honest answer. He said maybe they couldn't win in the traditional sense of conquering territory or forcing total surrender, but they could make the Concordance regret ever hearing the name Earth. They could inflict so much damage and cause so much pain that the aliens would be desperate to negotiate peace. Sometimes making the enemy suffer enough was better than actually defeating them. Fear could accomplish what victory might not. President Hayes nodded slowly. She spoke an authorization code that gave Marcus complete control of all military assets. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was now under his command. She told him to show the galaxy what happened when someone murdered Earth's people. Then she ended the transmission. Within hours, ships started moving throughout the solar system. Crews who had trained in secret for years finally learned what their real mission was. Men and women who had been told they were part of exploration or mining operations suddenly discovered they were actually warriors. Soldiers boarded transport ships. Pilots climbed into cockpits of fighters they had only flown in simulators before. Weapons officers armed systems that had never been fired outside of testing ranges. Captain Ryan Foster commanded a destroyer called EDF Vengeance. His ship was one of the first to reach the jump point at the edge of the solar system, where they could engage faster than light drives. His communications officer was Lieutenant Amy Parker, and she looked nervous as she monitored alien radio frequencies. She was listening to Concordance courier ships and military traffic. She told Ryan that everything sounded normal. The aliens had no idea that a human fleet was about to jump into their territory. Ryan allowed himself a cold smile. He told Amy to maintain complete radio silence. In 72 hours, the Concordance was going to learn a hard lesson. They would discover that humanity didn't forgive easily, and humans never forgot when someone killed their people. Mercy wasn't something Earth was interested in offering right now. The fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives. Earth had reverse-engineered this technology from studying Concordance ships during the 8 years of diplomatic contact. Human engineers had actually improved the original design and made it more efficient. The ships could now travel faster and farther than most Concordance vessels. This was another surprise the aliens weren't expecting. As the human warships disappeared into FTL space, leaving the solar system behind them, Marcus stood in the command center and watched the displays. Each ship was represented by a blue dot moving across the star chart. He thought about Ambassador Karen Price and Commander Jake Morrison and all the others who had been murdered under a flag of truce. The Concordance had violated every rule of diplomacy and every standard of civilized behavior. Marcus had served in the military for 35 years. He had joined when humanity's biggest concern was asteroid miners fighting over claims in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. He had risen through the ranks during peacetime, never expecting to command forces in an interstellar war. But history didn't care about what people expected. It only cared about what actually happened. He knew that what was about to occur would be called many things. Some would call it justice. Others would call it revenge. Some would say it was a necessary military response. Others would say it was a war crime. Marcus didn't know which label was correct, and he suspected all of them might be partially true. What he did know was that the Concordance had drawn first blood. They had shown humanity exactly how they treated species they considered inferior. Now Earth would show them what happened when you underestimated humans. The Concordance thought they were dealing with primitives who would be terrified into submission. Instead, they were about to face an enemy that had spent most of its history fighting wars against itself. Humans knew violence intimately. They understood warfare at a level that species who had lived in peace for millennia couldn't comprehend. The war had begun, and there would be no stopping it until one side broke completely. Marcus suspected it wouldn't be humanity that broke first. Humans were stubborn and they held grudges. The Concordance was about to learn both of these facts in the most painful way possible. Admiral Gregory Stone was already positioning his stealth ships near the Draxos system. Captain Ryan Foster and the main fleet were right behind him. Lieutenant Amy Parker and thousands of other humans were ready to fight. And back on Earth, factories were already building more ships and more weapons because everyone knew this war wouldn't end quickly. The Concordance had wanted to test humanity's worthiness. They were about to get results from that test, but the results weren't going to be what they expected at all. The Draxos military station floated in space like a giant metal flower with thousands of lights glowing across its surface. It was enormous, almost the size of a small moon. 20,000 Concordance personnel lived and worked there. The station served as the strategic command center for 40 star systems and coordinated military operations across a huge section of the galaxy. In 300 years of operation, nobody had ever attacked it. The Concordance considered it completely safe. Admiral Gregory Stone watched the station through the view screens of his flagship EDF Retribution. His ship was holding position 3 million kilometers away, far beyond the range of the station's sensors. The stealth technology coating his fleet made them nearly invisible. The ships were covered in special metamaterials that bent light and electromagnetic radiation around them. Heat signatures were masked by cooling systems that kept the ships at the same temperature as the surrounding space. To Concordance sensors, there was nothing out there except empty darkness. Gregory asked his tactical officer, Commander Nicole Brady, about the status of their weapons. She reported that all Reaper drone wings were ready to launch. The railgun platforms were in position. The Nightfall antimatter packages were armed and targeted at critical points on the station. Everything was ready for the attack. Gregory had spent 30 years in Earth's Navy. He had joined as a young officer, when humanity's biggest military concern was stopping pirates who raided mining operations in the asteroid belt. He had never imagined he would one day command weapons capable of destroying planets. The responsibility felt incredibly heavy, but every time doubt crept into his mind, he remembered the video of Ambassador Karen Price being murdered. He remembered the 73 crew members of Horizon's Gate being vaporized. Those memories pushed away any hesitation. He spoke to his bridge crew and told them something important. He said that what they were about to do would be controversial. Some people would call it a war crime. History would judge them, and some would say they were monsters while others would say they were heroes. Gregory couldn't predict which judgment would win. But he knew one thing for certain. The Concordance had shown humanity exactly how they treated species they considered inferior. They had murdered diplomats under a flag of truce. Earth was responding in the only language the Concordance seemed to understand, which was overwhelming violence. Gregory took a deep breath and gave the order. All ships were to execute Nightfall Protocol and fire at will. The battle began in complete silence because space carries no sound. 300 Reaper drones launched from hidden carrier ships. These small fighter craft accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, using powerful engines that human engineers had designed specifically for this purpose. By the time the station's long-range sensors detected anything unusual, the drones were already too close to stop. Concordance forces scrambled to understand what was happening, but they were too slow. The Reapers tore into the station's outer defenses like bullets through paper. Their railguns fired metal projectiles at such high speeds that the kinetic energy alone was devastating. Defense turrets exploded. Docking bays were ripped open to vacuum. Supply depots detonated as railgun rounds ignited fuel and ammunition. Within the first 5 minutes, the station's outer defensive ring was completely destroyed. Concordance fighters launched from the internal hangars that were still intact. Pilots from 3 different species rushed to their craft and took off to defend their station. These were experienced warriors who had trained for years, but they had trained to fight against other organic pilots who had reaction times limited by biology. The Reapers were different. Each drone had an artificial intelligence that could calculate firing solutions and evasive maneuvers thousands of times per second. The AI didn't get scared or confused or tired. It simply executed its programming with perfect precision. The space around the station became filled with explosions as Concordance fighters died. Some pilots managed to destroy a few drones before being killed themselves, but the exchange rate was terrible for the defenders. For every Reaper that went down, 5 or 6 alien fighters were destroyed. Within 10 minutes, the station's fighter complement was reduced to scattered debris and emergency beacons from ejection pods. The station itself was much harder to destroy than the fighters. Its hull was made of advanced alloys that could withstand tremendous punishment. Energy shields protected critical sections. Massive plasma cannons began tracking the human capital ships as they dropped their stealth fields to engage directly. These cannons were powerful enough to vaporize a destroyer with a single sustained burst. The battle entered a new phase as Hunter-class destroyers traded fire with the station's main defensive grid. Human ships darted and weaved, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the plasma fire. Their railguns hammered at the station's shields, slowly wearing them down. For a few minutes, it looked like the Concordance forces might actually hold. The station was incredibly tough and its weapons were devastating when they hit. Then the Nightfall packages arrived. These weapons represented humanity's darkest innovation. Each package was a missile about the size of a small car. Inside was a tiny amount of antimatter held in a magnetic containment field. The missiles had quantum guidance systems that made them almost impossible to jam or intercept. They could adjust their course millions of times per second to avoid defensive fire. 6 of them streaked toward the station's power core from different angles simultaneously. The station's automated defenses tried to stop them. Point defense lasers fired continuously. Plasma bursts tried to create walls of superheated gas that would destroy the missiles. Concordance personnel worked frantically to activate emergency protocols, but the Nightfall packages were too fast and too smart. 5 of the 6 missiles reached their target. Even 1 would have been enough. The antimatter containment fields collapsed on command and matter met antimatter in the most violent reaction physics allows. The explosion was so bright that it could be seen from 3 star systems away. The station's power core didn't just explode, it ceased to exist at the atomic level. The fusion reaction that followed briefly created temperatures hotter than the surface of a star. 20,000 Concordance personnel died so fast that they never knew what happened. One moment they existed and the next moment they were converted to energy and scattered atoms. Commander Nicole Brady's voice shook slightly as she reported that the target was destroyed. Her sensors were also picking up multiple Concordance ships jumping into the system. She counted at least 20 contacts and more were arriving every second. The station's distress signal had gone out before it was destroyed and now reinforcements were coming. Gregory asked how long, until his fleet could safely jump back to FTL. Nicole said they needed 4 more minutes for the jump drives to recharge after dropping out of stealth mode. Gregory nodded and opened a channel to all human ships. He ordered them into defensive formation, Charlie. They would hold their position and make the Concordance pay for every second of those 4 minutes. The Concordance response fleet arrived expecting to find rebels or pirates. Instead, they found human warships with technology that was equal to, or better than their own. The aliens had better shields, but humans had better weapons. The Concordants had more ships, but humans had better tactics. The battle was brutal and short and incredibly violent. Human destroyers focused their fire, overwhelming enemy shields through concentrated railgun barrages. Reaper drones swarmed individual ships, targeting engines and weapon systems. When Concordance vessels tried to surround human ships, the humans simply accelerated away at speeds the aliens couldn't match. Earth's forces fought like wolves, striking and retreating, never staying still long enough to be pinned down. 4 minutes felt like 4 hours, but finally the jump drives were ready. Gregory gave the order to retreat. One by one, the human ships engaged their FTL drives and disappeared. They left behind 3 destroyed destroyers and about 24 disabled drones. The Concordants lost 11 ships and their most important command center in this entire sector of space. As the last human ship jumped away, Admiral Gregory Stone recorded a message. He transmitted it on all known Concordance frequencies so everyone would hear it. He identified himself and explained exactly why this attack had happened. He told them that Earth would come for every installation, every fleet, and every world that had participated in or approved the murder of Ambassador Karen Price. He said the Concordants wanted to know if humanity was a threat to galactic peace. Now they had their answer. Humanity wasn't a threat. Humanity was a promise, and humans always kept their promises. The message reached Velcros Prime 6 hours later. The Grand Assembly convened an emergency session for the first time in 50 years. Council members from dozens of species argued and shouted and demanded answers. How had primitives done this? How had humans destroyed the Draxo station? How had they killed so many Concordance personnel and escaped with minimal losses? Nobody had good answers to these questions. The Concordants had thought the war would be a brief suppression campaign against primitives. They expected humans to surrender quickly when faced with superior numbers. Instead, they faced an enemy. 6 weeks into the war, the Concordance Council gathered in their emergency chambers deep beneath the surface of Velcros Prime. The room was designed to survive anything short of a planet-killing weapon. Council members from different species sat or stood or floated according to their biology. The mood was tense and frightened, which was something new for leaders who were used to being the most powerful force in the galaxy. High Leader Vexthar was a crystalline being whose species had founded the Concordance 4,000 years ago. His body was made of living crystal that changed colors based on his emotions. Right now he was flickering between red and orange, which meant he was furious and confused. He demanded to know how this was possible. The humans had barely achieved interstellar flight when the Concordants first made contact. Their technology was supposed to be centuries behind, yet somehow they were winning battles and destroying installations that had stood for hundreds of years. Intelligence Director Kirnal was from an amphibian species that lived both on land and in water. She activated holographic displays that showed data collected from battle sites and intercepted communications. She explained that the Concordance assessments had been completely wrong. While they monitored humanity's public technological development, the humans had concealed massive military advancement. Analysis of wreckage from the Draxo station suggested that Earth had been developing weapons specifically designed to counter Concordance capabilities for at least 8 years, maybe longer. Vexthar's crystal body flashed bright red. He asked if the humans had been preparing for war while pretending to negotiate peace. Was everything Ambassador Karen Price said just lies meant to keep the Concordants from seeing the real threat? Kirnal corrected him carefully. She said it appeared the humans were preparing for betrayal, not war. Intelligence had recovered some of Ambassador Price's reports that she sent back to Earth during the diplomatic process. These reports showed that she genuinely wanted peace, but she also expressed concerns about Concordance intentions. Earth's government suspected the Concordants might not be dealing honestly. The humans had hoped for the best but prepared for the worst. When the Concordants murdered their delegation, humanity was ready to respond. Another council member asked why the humans had come to Velcros at all if they suspected a trap. Kirnal explained that the humans needed to be certain about Concordance intentions. They also needed the Concordants to make the first aggressive move so they could justify what came next to their own people and to any other species that might be watching. What came next was a campaign that terrified the Concordants. Humanity didn't have enough ships to hold territory or fight a conventional war across hundreds of star systems. So they didn't try. Instead, they became ghosts that appeared without warning, destroyed important targets, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The Concordance had never faced an enemy that fought this way. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded a stealth frigate called Shadow Runner. Her mission was simple but terrifying for the enemy. She was supposed to find Concordance military assets and eliminate them. Over 8 weeks, her ship destroyed 6 supply depots that fed entire fleets. She eliminated 2 troop transports carrying soldiers to reinforce border systems. She even managed to destroy a shipyard that was under construction, setting back Concordance ship production by months. Her executive officer, Lieutenant Kevin Brooks, made an observation after their latest raid. He said the humans couldn't keep this pace forever. Eventually, Earth would run out of ships or ammunition or other resources needed to keep fighting. The Concordance was much larger and had far more industrial capacity. Lisa studied the star charts showing all their successful raids. She pointed out a pattern that Kevin had missed. In 6 weeks, humanity had hit 19 major targets. Each time the Concordance had failed to stop the attack or catch the raiders. Each failure resulted in Concordance officers being relieved of command for incompetence. Intelligence reports showed that at least 12 senior commanders had been removed from their positions. Some had been executed as examples to others. Lisa explained that destroying the Concordance military infrastructure was only part of the strategy. The real weapon was psychological. Every successful raid destroyed Concordance confidence. Officers became afraid to make decisions because failure meant death or disgrace. The command structure was falling apart as leaders turned on each other and blamed failures on their rivals. The Concordance belief in their own superiority was crumbling. The Concordance tried to adapt to human tactics. They reinforced their installations with more troops and better weapons. They established patrol routes and tried to predict where humans would strike next. They deployed massive sensor networks that were supposed to detect stealth ships. But humanity had spent most of its existence as the underdog fighting against stronger enemies. Humans understood asymmetric warfare better than species that had been dominant for millennia. For every defensive measure the Concordance put in place, Earth's military planners found a way around it. Back on Earth, the industrial base went into full war production mode. Every available resource was directed toward building ships and weapons. Orbital shipyards around Mars worked 24 hours a day. The facilities near Jupiter and Saturn were expanded rapidly. Automated mining operations stripped entire asteroids down to nothing, processing the raw materials into hull plating and weapons components. The human economy was completely focused on a single goal, which was making the Concordance pay an unbearable price for what they had done. President Linda Hayes addressed the United Earth Council 3 months after the war began. She informed them that humanity had received some interesting communications. 2 Concordance species that had not been involved in the decision to kill the human delegation wanted to open secret negotiations. They were sending peace feelers through indirect channels, trying to find out if Earth would be willing to talk. General Marcus Webb was immediately suspicious. He told the president it was probably a trap meant to lure humanity into lowering their guard. The moment Earth showed weakness or mercy, the Concordance would regroup and hit back with everything they had. President Hayes asked what the alternative was. Did Marcus want to just keep killing until one side or the other collapsed completely? She pointed out that war couldn't continue forever. And even if humanity could sustain the conflict indefinitely, she didn't want Earth to become the kind of species that only knew violence. Marcus understood her concerns, but he disagreed with the timing. He explained that right now humanity was winning because they were relentless and unpredictable. The Concordance still believed they could eventually turn things around and defeat Earth through superior numbers. The moment humans showed mercy or opened negotiations, the Concordance would interpret it as weakness. The pressure needed to continue until the enemy was completely broken and desperate for peace on any terms. Hayes told Marcus to continue operations, but she also ordered him to start planning for what would come after the war. Eventually, there would need to be a peace agreement, and humanity needed to think about what kind of galaxy they wanted to live in. Marcus agreed, but privately he thought they weren't anywhere close to that point yet. Admiral Gregory Stone's fleet struck next at the Telos shipyards, which was a massive facility that produced about 1/3 of all Concordance heavy cruisers. The attack was devastating and set Concordance naval production back by at least a year. Then Captain Ryan Foster led a daring raid on a fuel processing depot that supplied energy cells to ships across 5 sectors. Destroying that single target crippled Concordance logistics and left dozens of ships unable to refuel. Lieutenant Amy Parker had been promoted after showing exceptional skill in reconnaissance work. She now commanded her own ship and specialized in finding hidden concordance bases. She discovered 3 secret installations that weren't on any official charts. All 3 were destroyed within a week of being located. The Concordance realized that nowhere was safe, not even their most secret facilities. The Concordance was bleeding resources at an alarming rate. Their economy was straining under the pressure of constant warfare. Morale among their military was collapsing as officers and soldiers realized they were fighting an enemy they couldn't predict or stop. Political cohesion within the Concordance started to fracture as member species blamed each other for the disaster. But despite all these problems, the Concordance leadership had not truly accepted what was happening. They still believed that their size and resources would eventually win the war. They thought humanity would eventually make a mistake or run out of weapons or lose the will to keep fighting. The Concordance needed one more demonstration of human resolve, something so shocking that it would break their spirit completely. General Marcus Webb was already planning that demonstration. It would require risking a significant portion of Earth's fleet on a single operation. It would be incredibly dangerous and might fail completely, but if it succeeded, the war would end. The target was obvious. It had to be Velcros Prime itself, the heart of Concordance power. Humanity needed to prove that they could strike anywhere, even at the most defended world in the entire galaxy. The Velcro system had never been attacked in recorded history. The homeworld of the species that founded the Concordance was protected by 3 massive defense stations that orbited the planet like moons. Each station had enough firepower to destroy a fleet. 200 warships patrolled the system constantly. The planet itself had shield generators powerful enough to withstand sustained bombardment. The Concordance considered Velcros Prime completely safe from any possible attack. Admiral Gregory Stone planned to prove them wrong. Commander Nicole Brady looked at the battle plan on her display and spoke quietly so only Gregory could hear. She said the plan was insane. They were talking about assaulting the most heavily defended star system in the galaxy, with only 40 ships. The odds were terrible, and the chances of success seemed impossibly small. Gregory corrected her on the numbers. He said they actually only had 37 ships available for the attack. 3 had been lost in a recent engagement in the Gamma sector, when Concordance forces got lucky and caught a human patrol off guard. Nicole asked if having fewer ships somehow made the plan better. Gregory said no, but it made the attack more necessary. Humanity needed to show the Concordance that Earth could strike anywhere at any time, even at their most precious world. If the attack succeeded, the war would end. If it failed, at least humanity would go down fighting rather than hiding. The plan was dangerous to the point of being suicidal. While the main human fleet launched a fake attack at a border system to draw away mobile defense forces, Gregory's strike group would infiltrate Velcros using stolen identification codes from a captured Concordance freighter. They would approach the capital world disguised as a merchant convoy bringing supplies. The Concordance was arrogant enough to believe that nobody would dare attack their homeworld, so security had become relaxed over the years. Captain Lisa Morgan would lead the infiltration personally. Her stealth frigate Shadowrunner would hide inside the cargo bay of the freighter. Once they reached planetary orbit, they would have maybe 10 minutes before Concordance forces realized what was happening. That gave them one chance to deploy their weapons and complete the mission. Lisa briefed her crew and told them honestly that extraction might not be possible. If they couldn't escape, their job was to make sure the mission succeeded anyway, even if it cost their lives. The infiltration phase worked perfectly. The Concordance checked the freighter's identification codes and found them valid because they were real codes from a real ship. Security officers asked a few routine questions and then waved the convoy through without serious inspection. The Concordance was so confident in their superiority that they couldn't imagine anyone would be bold enough or crazy enough to attack Velcros Prime. That arrogance was about to cost them dearly. The human ships reached orbital approach vector and moved into position above 3 of Velcros Prime's largest cities. One of those cities was the capital where the Grand Assembly building stood. Gregory waited until all ships were exactly where they needed to be. Then he gave the order to execute the attack. The freighter's cargo bay doors opened and released 24 Reaper drones, followed immediately by Lisa's frigate and 6 other combat vessels. Concordance Defense Control didn't understand what they were seeing for almost 30 seconds. By the time alarms started going off across the planet, human forces were already attacking. What happened next was not an attack on civilians. Gregory had been very clear about the rules of engagement. They were only targeting military installations and government buildings. Killing innocent people would make humanity no better than the Concordance. But the display of force was overwhelming and terrifying for anyone watching from the ground. Human railguns fired at orbital defense platforms with perfect accuracy. Each shot was calculated to hit critical systems and disable the platforms without creating debris that might fall on the cities below. Reaper drones swarmed around orbital defense stations, destroying weapons and sensor arrays. An antimatter package was detonated at high altitude above the capital, producing an electromagnetic pulse that shut down the planetary shield generator without causing any casualties on the surface. The message was clear and unmistakable. Humanity could have destroyed Velcros Prime completely. They had the weapons and the opportunity. They chose not to kill civilians because, unlike the Concordance, humans understood the difference between warriors and murderers. Alarms blared across the entire planet. Defense fleets that had been patrolling the outer system desperately tried to return, but they were too far away. Local defense forces scrambled to respond, but they were confused and disorganized. Nobody had ever planned for an attack on the homeworld because everyone believed it was impossible. Gregory opened a transmission on all Concordance frequencies. He identified himself and spoke directly to the Concordance Council. He told them they were now experiencing what every human felt when the Concordance murdered Ambassador Karen Price under a flag of peace. The fear, the helplessness, the rage. He said humanity had demonstrated that Concordance defenses meant nothing. Human forces could reach them anywhere. Their stations were destroyed, their shipyards were rubble, their command infrastructure was shattered, and now Earth stood above their capital world with the power to end them completely. Gregory paused to let that reality sink into the minds of everyone listening. Then he continued speaking. He said that humanity was not like the Concordance. Humans did not murder diplomats or slaughter helpless people. They fought soldiers and destroyed military targets because that was what warriors did. The Concordance wanted to judge whether humanity deserved a place in their federation. Now Gregory was delivering humanity's judgment of them. The Concordance was not fit to lead anything. Their peace was built on threatening violence against weaker species. Their unity was maintained by intimidating anyone who showed strength. They were bullies, and bullies only understood one language. Concordance ships were finally reaching the battle zone, but the human fleet was already withdrawing. The mission was complete. Gregory's final words were broadcast across the entire Concordance communication network. He said Earth was willing to discuss peace terms, but humanity would never join the Concordance. Humans would never submit to alien authority, and if the Concordance ever threatened Earth again, humanity would not stop at burning stations and shipyards. They would burn worlds, every single one. This was not a negotiation or a threat. It was a statement of fact. The Concordance started this war by killing human diplomats. Earth was ending it by showing mercy that the aliens had not earned. The Concordance needed to choose wisely what happened next. The transmission ended and the human fleet jumped to faster than light speed. They left Velcros Prime intact but completely humiliated. The most powerful civilization in the galaxy had been attacked at their heart and proven helpless to stop it. 3 days later, the Concordance Council requested formal peace negotiations. They did not negotiate from a position of strength. They negotiated from fear and desperation and the certain knowledge that humanity could destroy them if the war continued. The resulting treaty gave Earth everything it wanted. Humanity would be completely independent with full territorial sovereignty. Human ships would never be threatened or searched. Human diplomats would be protected under the strongest possible guarantees. And the Concordance would pay reparations for every life lost when they murdered the delegation. More importantly, the balance of power across the entire galaxy shifted. Other species had been watching the war closely. They saw how humanity fought against impossible odds and won. They saw that the Concordance could be beaten. Within a year, the Federation that had dominated this region of space for thousands of years began to fracture. Member species started demanding equality instead of accepting subordination. Some left the Concordance entirely. Others formed new alliances. The galactic order that had seemed permanent and unchangeable was breaking apart. Ambassador Karen Price and the 82 others who died with her became legends throughout human space. Monuments were built bearing their names. Schools taught their story to children. Every human who traveled beyond the solar system carried the knowledge that their species had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. Earth had sought peace, but when peace was answered with murder, humanity responded with devastating force. Admiral Gregory Stone retired after the war ended. He was troubled by the deaths of so many people under his command, both human and alien, but he was satisfied that humanity had secured its place among the stars. In his final log entry, he wrote about the nature of the war and what it meant. He said humanity did not want the conflict and had sought only friendship. But when that friendship was answered with treachery and murder, Earth responded the only way it could. He acknowledged that history would debate whether humans were heroes or monsters. He suspected they were both. But he knew one thing with certainty. Humanity would never again bow before species that considered themselves superior. Earth proved it belonged among the stars not because humans were peaceful, but because they were willing to fight for their right to exist. The war lasted 4.5 months from the first attack to the final treaty. The legend of what happened when humanity was betrayed would lay